Hey there, this is Pastor Eddie. Want to continue reading from my dad's book, Before Aspirin and Other Things. The title of this chapter is Yankee Rubbish. The story begins. Before the horse and buggy faded altogether from the South's main street, my brother and I saw a clerk stocking a shelf in our dad's store with odd-shaped cans we had never seen the likes before. They were red and modeled after miniature log huts with tiny chimney spouts. The label on each little red house said Log Cabin Syrup, and in small print from New York State. Curiosity at once fired my brain, and I unscrewed a wee lid from a chimney. But a covering of silver foil closed the opening. No problem at all. I got a straight pen, and when nobody was looking, I pricked the thin seal, and my brother and I took turns sucking a little of the succulent, wonderful liquid from that pygmy hut. Wow! I never felt anything so sweet and delicious in all my life. The unfamiliar taste of sugary maple did indeed ravishly delight my palate, and I was in mid-moment wholly addicted to something downright foreign and so unconfederate. And from my brother's rapt visage, I knew he too had suddenly accrued an irresistible affinity for this candy juice from Lincoln's country. Sometime later, after indulging every log cabin, we recapped the tops tightly and stacked them back in rows exactly as we found them. Furthermore, in the afterglow of our newfound craving, we gave our mother no rest until she put one of those log cottages from heaven's pantry on the breakfast table. By contrast, however, the elfin hut of Yankee-made nectar sitting alongside the tall pewter pitcher with the image of Robert E. Lee engraved on both sides and holding Granddad's sugarcane syrup seemed all too revolutionary, to say the least. Our mother's dad was not a large man, but he was without exception a giant in principle and conviction, mighty in faith, and truly an ardent son of the South. We grandchildren loved him dearly and called him Pa. When Pa spoke of syrup, he meant the sugar cane variety, thick and oozy, made for his own crop, grown on his own farm. My brother and I happily accompanied him many times on cold autumn days when he hauled his stalks to the mill to have the juice crushed out and cooked into syrup. Ice-cold cane juice on those frosty mornings was nothing less than a beverage from paradise, and Pa would happily intone, "Drink it down, boys, and tell me you like it." We did, and he smiled upon us. When the syrup was ready to be poured into the buckets, Pa would strip off a piece of cane peeling, dip it into the syrup, taste it, smack his lips, and say, "Boys, that's mighty good syrup. Here, put some in your mouth." We would take his peeling and do the same, smack our lips and say, "That sure is mighty good syrup, Pa." And Pa would grin, pat us on the head, and say, "Now that's my boys." Against this backdrop, it was Pa's custom to pop in most any morning and eat breakfast with us. On this particular day, it was biscuits, butter, and syrup. With high visibility and without a care, my brother and I deluged our buttered bread and log cabin syrup from New York State. And Pa inquired, "What's that mess you boys are pouring on your biscuits?" "It's maple syrup from the store, Pa," my brother sang out. "We sure like maple syrup better than cane syrup now. Do you want to eat some with us?" Intuitively, my natural proclivity told me that the most favored status my brother and I held with our grandpa had unexpectedly found itself treading on a sagging foundation. And by any account, my brother's innocent confession did not help one bit. In the second there fell upon our table an awesome stillness. It seemed that the earth and all therein had abruptly become silent and foreboding. Pa's face had turned to granite, and Mama and Dad's eyes darted back and forth at each other. It was quite obvious my brother and I had transgressed grievously, and we squirmed under the nagging load of our exposed violation. To make matters worse, our parents uttered no word of support on our behalf, and I called upon a higher power. Lord, if thou wilt, have mercy on my brother and me. Eons later, Pa's body finally stirred. He reached over and he picked up the little maple house. He put on his glasses. He read the label. Then he poured some in a spoon, like medicine. He tasted it, smacked his lips, grimaced, and then he blurted, "Yuck! This isn't syrup. This is Yankee Rubbish. Too dark, too sweet, and too thin. Colored sugar water is all it is. Here, read the label." He leaned over and held out the alien shack to me. I cringed and scoured my brain for an appropriate appeasement acceptable to Pa. Then I just sputtered out, "Pa, we don't like this Yankee Rubbish no more. No, sir. We sure do like cane syrup now." And I reached for Robert E. Lee. Pa leaned back in his chair, paused a moment, grinned, and drawled, "Well, now, that's my boys." After that, I forever deemed it an outright must to never, ever eat maple syrup or any other foreign food in Pa's presence again. So we sopped biscuits and cane syrup and watched Pa beam with joy and cheerfully ring out, "Eat some more, boys, and tell me it's good." But alas, the delectable taste of sweet maple had already bonded with my southern taste buds, and ever now and then, when no one was watching, I pricked the foil on a tiny chimney spout and savored again the forbidden Yankee Rubbish made for the angels to drink. Over my many years, I've often thought of those syrup days and how they underscore why we are the way we are and our intense difficulty in accepting and tolerating unaccustomed things, unfamiliar people, and their accents and their ways. The greater cause, of course, lies in the preconditioning of self begun in early childhood when the mind is indelible and attitudes and habits are easily formed. Fortunately, undesirable traits can be broken and bad attitudes can be altered even down to syrup. But sometimes it must be forced. For example, I was on the whole at one time quite prejudiced and discriminatory. Yet it was not until I found myself in the midst of many individuals in the United States Navy did I learn to appreciate fellows from different regions of the country, folks of different color, unfamiliar ways, and peculiar enunciations. Some Yankee boys, oddly enough, soon became cherished friends of mine. In fact, I even got to liking northern food almost as much as my beloved southern victuals. So how do you bring wrongful preconceptions to heel? From my standpoint, the two most important approaches are, first, expose yourself to people not of your kind and their way of life with an open heart and mind. Then, reread the New Testament story of the Good Samaritan found in Luke chapter 10, and you might surprisingly discover that the rejected half-breed Samaritan can represent every color and class on earth. Strive to be kind and helpful like him, and you will surely find the Lord is good and gracious and is apt to smile upon you, pat you on the head, and say, "That's my boy." It will be the smartest move you've ever made. Dum, da-dum, dum, dum. This is such an amazing story, and it's dealing obviously with prejudices and things that are inside of us even from our earliest childhood. A great challenge for the week would be for you to try something incredibly different and just see if maybe the Lord might pat you on the head and say to you, "That's my boy," or "That's my girl." Have a blessed week.